In 1928, as an eager 18-year-old, Bill boarded the Empress of France and headed to Canada with $5, a grade 3 education, and a powerful zest for life.
Remarkable for a fellow from a little village where many people came from and ended up in Sudbury. He was remarkable in how his life ended up. He took such an interest in so many things, and he got involved in so many things, and kind of evolved in something you would never expect from a fellow from a little village in Ukraine. And I never understood how that happened. Was it something in his DNA? What sparked him? Some kind of initiative?
I always thought in a sense, he was a mystery to me, because he was, I think, living in Sudbury and knowing a little bit about the Sudbury Ukrainian community. I think he was not actually part and parcel, but he was an exception.
Months before my father died, he asked my brother Ihor and I to read a specific poem by Ivan Franko, the Ukrainian poet whose poems my father memorized and recited on numerous occasions, and whose words influenced how my father lived his own life. In the poem, A Parable About Life, Franko describes a man walking on his journey through life, in which he encounters obstacles and difficulties, but eventually discovers that loving one another is the most important thing in life, a theme which was paramount to Franko all his life. The image of this man walking was particularly appropriate for my father, who was well known for his walking to work around Sudbury and through the woods.
Притча про життя. Іван Франко. Було се в Індії. Степом безлюдним ішов чоловік, і враз напав на нього голодний лев. Побачивши звірюку ще здалека, почувши рик її, почав тікати чоловік щодуху. Тікаючи, наскочив він нараз на глибочену балку. Не було часу вертатись, не було де скритись, а звір уже близько. Бачить чоловік, що зо стіни безодні, зо стрімкого скального обриву худа берізка в щілині виросла, і вершок зелений понад безодню к сонцю піднімає. Недовго думаючи, він чепився за ту берізку, держачись руками за пень її, повис над гирлом темним, аж поки, бовтаючи там ногами, на щось твердого крихту не оперся. Тоді аж відітхнув, і дрож смертельно трохи втихла. І почав тоді сірома озиратись довкола, де він і що з ним.
In a radio interview with Don McMillan on Sudbury radio station CKSO the year he retired, my father described his early life.
So now, Mr. Kuryliw, I take it that you were born in the Ukraine. And what part of the Ukraine are we talking about?
Western Ukraine. They call Galicia. That's a town that be Potoczka, my village where I was born.
Now, your father, you told me, you really don't, you recall your father. He left to fight when you were very young, right?
40 years and a half when father go to fight in 1914. At that time, that part of Ukraine was under the Austria rule, and father was fighting with the Austrian army against the Russians. Only I remember that when father depart from my village to the army, mother gave him a jackknife on corner of the house. This is the last time.
That's the last memory you have, eh?
That's it.
And here we have you growing up on the farm in this little village. About how big? How many acres?
About 100 acres. Wheat, all what we have in Saskatchewan, everything was in our farm. From the chicken to goat to sheep to cows, horses, and so on.
And what did you do? You helped with the harvest?
The harvest, everything what necessary on farming.
And you started this at about age 7 or 8 or something?
7, 8 years. When I was grow up, so that most important for us was go to the hall like we have in Sudbury to study music, singing in choir, and small theater.
When did you come to Canada?
1928. You know, like all young people, they want to travel and so on.
Where did you go first in Canada?
1928 to Saskatoon. Well, they always speak of nice land and
Yeah.
so on.
Could you speak any English?
No, no one works.
How did you manage?
These people that I entered with, there was Ukrainian, because lots of Ukrainians, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta. See.
But you didn't work all that long on the farm. You moved on.
2 weeks in Saskatoon.
Then where did you go?
Then I went out to Winnipeg for 2 weeks, and then I go to Thunder Bay. I was water boy for 3 months.
Coming to Sudbury, again, you'd have friends or relatives or people you know or Ukrainians here to come to. Is that the idea? Eh?
That's it.
Where did you stay when you first came here?
Was in Monk Street, and that's an Donovan section.
The Depression is coming along about this time, and you're a single man, so you're work for a while, laid off for a while, off and on for a while, eh?
Well, you know, as Depression, that was...
worldwide, eh?
Well, that's everybody was not so well,
Yeah.
and so on and so on.
So you did the best you could. Didn't you?
Well, that's it. I even teach that time, and I go to walk to Coppercliff. They give me 25 cents, or they give me a meal.
Now, sir, you have a great fondness for your own village back in the Ukraine.
Yes, I collect money, and I wrote even my own. I help them to build up that hall over there, and library, and send even few, about dozen of girls to the school, and to learn how to sewing and art and also.
Did you not marry eventually one of the girls that you'd helped send to
The
school?
one of the students that I helped them, they are married.
My father spent 76 of his 94 years in Canada, but he never forgot Potoczce, the village he came from, nor those he left behind.
Дорогий сину, колись ти би хотів почути мамин голос, але то вже буде запізно. Дорогий сину, може, ся побачим на Йосифатовій долині? Дорогий сину, цей лист сховай собі на пам'ятку. Дорогий сину, може, ти колись татом зістанеш? Дорогий сину, колись будеш знати, яке мама горе перебуває. О, Мати Божа, спам'ятай мого сина.
Ой, люля-люля, мій малесенький синульку, я ж тебе знайшла, як полола цибульку. Ой, люля-люля, мій малесенький рачку, я ж тебе знайшла, сидячи в пастирначку. Ой, люля-люля, маленькую дитину, куди б я не йшла, я й тебе й не покину. Куди буду йти, то й тебе буду брати. За рочок, за два буду служику мать.
My father arrived in Canada in July of 1928 at the age of 18. In November of that year, he was hired by Inco in Sudbury. Nickel demand was booming. Briefly, His first job was as a rock picker at 41 cents an hour. Soon, however, the depression and falling nickel demand made employment at Inco very uncertain over the next several years. He, like many other mining workers in Sudbury, was laid off and rehired a number of times over the next 8.5 years. Often there would be up to 500 men lined up each morning, hoping to find some work. Sudbury in the 1930s was filled with labor unrest. Numerous attempts to form mining unions failed. Workers suspected of promoting unions were fired, and Inco used priests to help identify troublemakers. Within the Ukrainian community, there were ongoing political conflicts between two main groups. For almost all of his life in Sudbury, my father was very active with the nationalist group, the Ukrainian National Federation. At one time, he was involved with the Ukrainian Labor Temple, a socialist organization.
And I was told that at the beginning of his life in Sudbury, the only game in town was the Labor Temple. And so a lot of them joined the Labor Temple, not knowing that it was, it was a workers' place, so they will all flock there and became members. And he was such a gregarious person, such a passionate person about Ukrainian culture and music and whatever. They wanted to send him, he told me, I remember him telling me this, that they wanted to send him to Moscow for training. Now, I don't know what they were training him for, but for some sort of training to become sort of, I guess, a bigger fish in the pond in the labor movement. And then I understand your mother put a stop to that. And, so I guess he loved her enough that he listened to her and he joined the UNF. And he had a lot of friends in all camps, He was not short of friends.
When he was employed, he often worked in a dangerous environment. The hardships he went through helped mature him during the 1930s. He learned how to read and write and to play the mandolin and guitar. He joined the Ukrainian Labor Temple's mandolin orchestra and went to many cultural events there. He also corresponded with my mother for 8 years. She had been orphaned in 1928, and while he supported her education and view, it's also obvious from reading some of his letters that my mother kept that he began to love her. The letters also reveal that their communication was often difficult. Letters could take months to arrive, and some were perhaps lost. At different times, each of them expressed frustration that the other had not replied.
Дорога Нусю, лист від тебе отримав, і в нім листу, за що я тобі вдячний. Кажеш, що чекаєте на гроші. Так, гроші я вислав, ще 33-го року, в місяці грудні 21-го. Чому ти не отримала, я сам не знаю. Пропасти не повинні, бо я вислав поштовим переказом $10.
Дорогенький Васю, від тебе нічого нема, ніякої вістки, чому, не знаю. Чогось бентежить мене твоя мовчанка. Васю, може вже недовго. Я нині одержала папери з агенції Станіславова. Вірити не хочу, а в кінці не знаю, що думати. Пишу лише цю карточку, бо більше не можу. Всі хвилі я під враженням. Васю, присилай гроші. Я спішу до тебе. Нуся.
Навіки твій, хай буде, як буде. Чи маю казати, що тебе не забуду? Нехай не турбується серце твоє. Заставлюся відданим, тебе не забуду. Ти серце і кохання моє. Дивися в очі. Ну, так знай, що ти не сирота. Ти маєш того, кого твоя душа бажає. Будь спокійна, я твій, а ти моя.
Despite those challenges, my mother crossed the Atlantic, bringing with her the wedding dress she had made on that Singer sewing machine. 1 week after she arrived in Canada, on July 5th, 1936, they were married. 3 months later, my father was laid off again, for the last time. They moved to Kirkland Lake for a few months before he was rehired at Inco in May 1937. With war approaching, worldwide demand for nickel was strong again. My parents settled in a Sudbury neighborhood known as the Donovan, a highly mixed ethnic area. They soon started a family and helped to build a community.
Well, the Donovan, to live in the Donovan, I mean, it was filled with ethnic people, you know, like Slavs of every color, Ukrainians, Serbians, Croatians, Slovaks, whatever. And nobody, like, you know, the old saying, we never locked the doors because I don't think anybody had anything worthwhile to steal. People, you know, sort of say about the new immigrants today living, you know, 5 or 6 families together. Well, we did the same thing in those days, in the 30s. Nobody could afford a home. Nobody could afford a car. So we would have one bedroom and a common kitchen and a common washroom. And bath nights were very interesting, but you know, and some of the meals, you know, each family would take a turn at it, and you had to live that way because you couldn't afford any other way of doing it. And from the hall, they used to they'd have a party. They would have it at somebody's home, and they would raise money or whatever it is. So the ladies would bring, you know, it's like a potluck supper, and the men would bring something on the hip. And also each family brought a stick of wood so that they heated that house for that evening with the stuff that they brought. So it was different times, and you know, the attitude of the people was certainly different. They seemed to have time for each other.
Перший зирк його впав на коріння деревця, що в ньому була його єдина опора. Що за притичина? Глядить, 2 миші, одна білява, друга чорна, пильно, запопадно і ненастанно і прудко гризуть коріння того деревця, лапками землю порпають, працюють немов навняті, щоб його підпору підгризти, підкопати, повалити. Похолола в того чоловіка на серці, бо в ті хвилі лев розжертий надбіг над пропасть, і його побачив, і лютим ревом відгомінь збудив. Не міг його дістати, але люто глядів згори, скакав і землю гриз, ждучи, аж він угору знов підлізе. І глянув вниз у пропасть чоловік, і бачить, що на дні тієї балки страшна гадюка в'ється і широко пащеку рознімає, жде лише, щоб він упав для неї на поталу. Померкло в голові у чоловіка, за серце стисло, і холодним потом все тіло облилось. Та враз почув, що те, о що опер він ноги, якось ворушиться. Зирнув, аж пробіг. Це гадюка, звита в клубок, що в щілині дримала. Рано був скрикнуть чоловік, та голос в горлі задушив переляк. Рад був молиться, та тривога вбила побожну думку. Наче труп холодний він висів, певний, що в найближчій хвилі коріння миші підгризуть. Гадюка у нога вкусить, сил його не стане, і вниз він упаде, змії в пащеку.
It was at this time that my father became attracted to the works of Ivan Franko. In his writings, Franko promoted social justice, democracy, and encouraged positive activism, values that my father tried to emulate. He also began a lifetime practice of memorizing many of Franko's poems.
His love and respect of Franko probably goes back to his youth, and it would be interesting to know what stimulated that. as you know, at one time here in Canada, for a large part of the Ukrainian emigre community, the intellectual, political leaders, if you want to call them that, were Ivan Franko, Mikhailo Drahomaniw, Pavlik, and others who tended to be, I would call them, social democrats in their political and world outlook. And I wouldn't be surprised if your dad's respect and appreciation of Ivan Franko didn't, in some way, wasn't in some way stimulated by his political views, his ideas of what life was, what society was.
But Franko did not only write poetry, he wrote prose, and he did a lot of research. He was a politician, he was a literary person, so he was probably one of the most learned person in Ukraine at that time, especially in Western Ukraine. I don't think I can think of anybody who was more well-read and more well-written and did more research than Ivan Franko.
I think Franko's work, his poetry and stuff like that, resonated so strongly with that whole generation. There were a lot of things to be kind of discombobulated and not so happy about in Western Ukraine at that time period, and Ivan Franko sang the song. Yeah. I can imagine Ivan Franko and your dad sitting in a bar having a beer, discussing, so what do you think, Wasyl? And I bet they would agree on a lot of things.
After arriving in Toronto, being a walker the way he was in Sudbury, he walked down Bloor Street and discovered that there was a Ukrainian art gallery. He visited several times, and in it he noticed that there was a bronze statue to a Ukrainian poet, Taras Shevchenko. In his mind, of course, he always thought that the other poet, Ivan Franko, was as significant, and especially in his life. So he, in his mind, decided that maybe he would commission a bronze. There was a sculptor from Lviv, from Ukraine, that was visiting Canada. He had already done a number of bronze Ivan Frankos in Ukraine, so we knew about this, and we asked that he produce one.
And it was one of these summers where I was teaching in Lviv, and so I dropped in to the sculptor, who was a friend of ours, and I thought he was going to be sending it by mail to Canada, and he said, no, I knew you were coming, and as a result, you can take it back. I was a little shocked. They wrapped it up in some kind of plastic on the farm, and I asked how heavy it was, and it was 11 kilos. So this was part of my hand luggage that I had to cart around.
Here I have a whole sheaf of paper, and there's quite a number of them here. And on each one, would you believe, there is a poem written out by Bill's hand. It's a rather unique kind of a document. Bill was a welder at Inco, at the Fruit Stobie mine. And there were times during the course of his shift where he didn't have anything to do, or there was no mechanical work to be done. So instead of wasting his time, he decided that he would memorize some of these poems by Ivan Franko. And he didn't want to take the books with him because he would get them all messed up. So he wrote out the poems on all kinds of little bits of pieces of paper and took these with him. To such an extent you can see them, they even have some dirt on them because his hands were not clean when he was reading. There is another aspect to the story which involves me. During the course of one summer, he had me type out these poems, but I think this was not that he couldn't write them out and take it with him. He indirectly got me to read some poems by Ivan Franko.
He knew a lot of Franko's poetry by heart. I heard him recite a lot of that. And as I recall, most of it was didactic in its intention. It wasn't just poetry, not just singing. It was telling a story or teaching a lesson.
And of course, you know, another memory, of course, is his recitation of Ivan Franko. Always appropriate.
I never thought of your dad as a performer. It's not like he always wanted to be on stage during some event at the Ukrainian Hall. But I know whatever chance he could, he'd try and work in a Franko poem that was appropriate for the occasion. Now, sometimes it was at the hall during a concert, but more often than not, it was at somebody's house, like an informal gathering, and we'd be talking about a bunch of things, and someone would say something, and he'd say, "Ah, that reminds me of a Franko poem," and he'd recite the poem. And I had a sense when he was delivering the poem that he was being very thoughtful of the words. He wasn't just reciting from rote. Now, you know, Franko poems can be pretty long, and sometimes he'd get a word wrong, and he'd pause, and he'd back up a couple of sentences, and then continue reciting with the right word.
Несло нове, багатше життя в своєму. Так весь свій мозок, і нерви, і серце, і ти в свої цимбали співачу вкладай. Будь її колос, лушпина стебиться.
I gave an Ivan Franko party when I was living on Grenadier Road, and we imported him from Sudbury, and he recited Ivan Franko for about half an hour, and then Ihor sat down at the piano, and we sang all night.
Once Jid and Baba moved to Toronto, our relationship changed. I was quite a bit older already, in my teens, and I visited with them a lot, and Jid would prep poems for me to learn. The first one that I remember, and I used quite a bit when we would go kuletovate, was a Vinchuvanya. And it was long, and it was great, and it had really useful application in my life. And then there were other little ones, all Franko, and my favorite one was sort of a very sort of sad love poem that he gave me, and that he would recite with great heart. And I'll try to remember what I can. Як почуєш вночі край свого вікна, що щось плаче і глибкає важко, не стривожся і сна, не будися, моя пташко. Це не та сирота, що без мати блука, не голодний жебрак, моя пташко. Це розпука моя, невтішима душа. Це душа моя плаче так важко. I think it was about love and lovers being apart. It was sweet.
Вітаємо, це є українська телевізійна програма. Я називаюся Любомир Кобурський і зі мною Оля Штурик. Поети є дуже виняткові особи, бо вони до нас говорять через свою поезію, помимо того, що вони відійшли від свого світу. Що Іван Франко би нам сказав? Що би він нам порадив? Ми сьогодні поговоримо із Василем Курилівим, і він нам поможе відповісти на ці питання, бо він знає майже всю поезію Івана Франка, пана Василя Куриліва.
Всі до одного до церкви пруть. А як перший раз Христос воскрес заспівали, то всі, мов діти, заридали, аж плач той церквою потряс. Так бачилось, що вік ми ждали, аж дотерпілись, достраждали, що він воскрес посеред нас. І якось так зробилось нам у душах легко, ясно, тихо, що готов був кожній всій землі кричать, співать, минуло лихо. Найзліші вороги прощались, всі обнімались, цілувались, а дзвони дзвонять, не встають. А молодь бігає, мов п'яна, кричить, що сили в кожний кут. Нема вже панщини, ні пана. Байдітвора, що старших бачить, і собові вигукує, неначе перепелята були всі. А як скінчилась Божа хвала, на цвинтар вийшов весь народ, і як було нас кількасот, на землю впала ціла громада і заспівала величний той хвалебний гімн «Тебе, о Господи, хвалим».
My father was known for his recitation of Franco at events, but there were so many other aspects of his outgoing and outsized personality that people still vividly remember. In the post-war years, with a strong Canadian economy and a high demand for nickel, he felt established with a new secure position at INCO and a young family with 3 children at home. It was during this time that his confidence and persona grew, and he began to earn the nickname Action Bill.
The impression was there. This was a dynamic personality. My memories of him are just vibrant. And that's what he was. He was personality. He was a very positive person. Other things that I remember about him, when he met you, there was always a bear hug. There was always a handshake that was strong, confident. He met people and he exuded confidence. Oh, and something else. When he spoke to me, he looked with those twinkling eyes. He spoke directly to me. Nobody else was important. He made me feel important. You know, not many people can do that. He did.
But he was passionate. He was a passionate man. And he was passionate about his culture. For that, I loved him.
But the first time I saw him, I guess, was in a photograph. It's when we were living in Japan, and you had a photo of him and your mother, which was taken on the way when you were leaving for the airport to go to Japan. And it was a little bit distant, but I could look at him, and I saw somebody that was very, it seemed to be very alive, very energetic. He had a sense of humor. He had your mother in a little bit of a bear hug around her shoulders with a big smile. He was obviously somebody very fit. And that's, to some extent, some of the characteristics that I got to know when I finally did get to meet him and know him over the many years.
So for me, growing up, Steve was sort of a mythological figure. He was larger than life, and I distinctly remember the story, and I remember sharing the story with my friends that my grandfather, when blueberry picking, encountered a bear and faced off with a bear. One of my earliest memories of Jid was when Patrick and I first went out to visit with him and Baba in Sudbury. I don't remember how old I was, probably 5, 6. And just he and I went for a long walk to the lake, and I remember him being barefoot and shirtless, as that was his uniform in the summertime. He was dark, 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 and he encouraged me to go barefoot with him as well. And we walked forever and ever, and I remember being at first uncomfortable with taking off my shoes, but he really insisted that that was the way to go, and so I did. And then he also didn't want me to tell Baba that we were walking barefoot, so that was our little secret. And we made it to the lake, and we swam, and we had a great time. But I think it speaks to the experience of knowing him as a child. Everything is amplified, so I thought he was much taller than he actually is, much bigger than he actually is, and very eccentric.
Somebody told me, or I heard somewhere, and like I was really young, maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 or maybe even younger, about your dad walking to work, which was like to Fruit Mine, which was about 2 miles from, you know, where you lived, naked. It wasn't until much later that I realized that what they really meant was that he went to work shirtless. But I still had the impression that he went to work shirtless like all year round.
One of the funniest memories of my childhood was to hear people talking about Pan Kuryliw the moment blueberries appeared in the forests around the Sudbury area, betwixt the rocks and shrubbery, picking blueberries in the nude. Apparently he loved to strip right down. He loved the sun, and when he got a suntan, it was from the top of his head to the tips of his toes. What was really touching, though, was to receive very often towards the end of that season a basket, not just a little container, but a basket brimful of blueberries.
Another aspect of Bill I'd describe him as was somebody very curious. Curious about people, curious about the world, curious or open. When he'd meet people, he'd be always very ready to meet them and talk with them, especially if they were from somewhere else in the world or had a background from somewhere else. He'd want to talk to them about where they were from and something about their background. And he was just sort of widely involved in so many things, and I think that was partly because of his openness and curiosity about the world.
Well, he was a very friendly person. He liked to make friends with everybody, and he knew how to make his way up to the club of VIPs. If you had the Premier of Ontario speaking somewhere, you could see that your dad was very close by, and you could see his smiling face right there, and so on. So he was very eager to say hi to people who were important in the world.
Well, your father would come in, Mr. Kuryliw would come in, and he brought joy and he brought life up into this executive row. And you could hear his voice, and he knew everybody on executive row. He knew everybody, whether it was Mr. Prince or Mr. Saddington or whomever. And he knew them on first name basis. And of course he would come by and see me. And so he would talk English to all of them when he would see them. But of course he spoke Ukrainian to me. And he would have a big hug for me. And of course he knew me from, childhood. And always had a big kiss and a big hug. And he would always ask me to do a favor. And of course I would break into meetings and ask, could Mr. Prince please see Mr. Kuryliw? And of course they would always see him. Because it was important, because Mr. Kuryliw could do some things politically for them, and then they would sponsor us. They always sponsored the Ukrainian National Federation or the Ukrainian celebrations that we were having. But what I remember mostly is that he brought life and joy into this dead space.
But I do want to tell you that when I walked in tonight that a reporter that's been here for all of the years that you've been here is leaving. It's his last night tonight, and he just told me that as I walked through, and it's Wasyl Kuryliw from the Ukrainian press. He covers all the Ukrainians in Valley East as well as the ones in Sudbury, and both of them are very pleased with that. And he's at every meeting here. I don't know what church he belongs to. I think it's Our Lady of Perpetual Tickets, but he certainly gets all of us when we walk in the door, and he does a fine job representing regional council in his weekly paper. And I think we should recognize it's his last night. It's unofficial, but we didn't know, as far as I know. And I think he's a dobra reporter, and I think we should recognize him for that, Mr. Chairman.
My father reported on council for the New Pathway, a Ukrainian Canadian newspaper. He was also their best advertising salesman, famous for walking everywhere in Sudbury, selling ads to businesses and politicians. Each Christmas and Easter, the paper had to publish a second section just to accommodate all the Sudbury ads.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to mention another contribution to our community that Wasyl Kuryliw has made. I guess about 40 years ago, Bill played the cello in the first Sudbury Symphony Orchestra that was conducted by Emil First. and I played first violin B. So anyway, that goes back some time. And like Councillor Hayduck, I didn't do as well as what Bill did, but he's to be recognized for his contribution from that perspective as well. Thank you.
I guess the same thing drove him, that, like his love for poetry, Ivan Franko. It's the same thing that drove him for the music. You know, he played guitar. It was not, you know, it was not uncommon to see him going to the hall with his guitar for some concert or something, and he would sing a song, you know, during the concert. He played in the mandolin orchestra, and we had a very good mandolin orchestra, and he participated in that. And I think that was his drive. That the culture was, you know, he loved that.
I remember him playing the cello. I remember him going up into the attic and practicing various things. It became clear that he was part of the Sudbury Symphony. I had not realized that he had been, had acquired all of this knowledge basically on his own, that he was, as we call them in Ukrainian, a samouk, one who taught himself. But he played the mandolin, he played the trumpet, he was part of the band with the Reserved Army, and that was also very unusual, to have somebody within the Ukrainian community that would join the Reserve Army. And so all of these things became clear to us, and these were things that very few other people in the Ukrainian community did.
As part of his general attitude towards community service, he also thought that belonging to military was important. And just coincidentally, there was a militia group, 58th Light Anti-Aircraft Squadron in Sudbury, and he joined that. But also, as part of the militia, they had a marching band, or a concert marching band. He decided in his wisdom that he would just as well play in it. He learned to play the trombone. At the same time, he suggested to me that I could also join. I did, and I eventually learned to play an instrument called the alto horn. And we both played in concerts, and whenever necessary, we marched together.
He used to invite my girlfriends over to 21 Baker Street, and he'd play the mandolin, and he made sure that my girlfriends knew the Ukrainian songs by heart.
One of the things that always characterized Bill to me was how parsimonious he always was when it came to himself, but how generous he was when it came to others. And there was a incident we had in Sudbury when we were visiting one time, when he came home wearing a brand new coat, very unusual. And he told a story about how he was walking down the road, and some guy got out of a truck, came over to him and handed him this brand new coat. He says, "Son of a gun." He couldn't understand why this happened, and you told him it was probably because his old coat was so shabby that the guy thought he was homeless. You know, and then I used to hear stories that he'd tell of how he never bought a Christmas tree, because since you celebrated Christmas in January, he'd wait until everybody else threw out their trees after December 25th, and he'd bring one home. You know, but this was somebody who, even in the depths of the Depression, you know, when he was working on and off for about 50 cents an hour, would send money back to the village to help people there, and also his future wife go to school. And throughout his life in Sudbury, he was always extremely generous with his time and money, especially all the fundraising efforts he did for the Ukrainian organizations and community.
Councillor Gordon.
Well, Chair, I'd just like to echo what Councillor Onitsky has said. You know, there was a time in this community when the Chamber of Commerce was having a very difficult time having enough members. And Bill went out and he recruited more members for the Chamber of Commerce, I think, than they ever had to that date. And he has been really active in the Ukrainian National Federation. He's made a real difference to them. He has been, in many respects, the godfather. He's the one that has always made sure that the culture and that the educational values that the Ukrainian community in this region believes in was followed to the T.
Very dedicated to the UNF, I think. Dedicated to the cultural thing and to music and to people that he worked with, you know, at the hall. He spent an awful lot of time at the hall raising monies or getting materials for various projects. The campgrounds at Richard Lake, the 3 huge barracks that we have, and there's still 2 of them left. It's just unbelievable how much material he got from Inco, and because through these contacts that he had at Rotary and the Lions Club and everything, and he got the material, and of course the members built it, but then he would go out and get the paint to paint it, because you have to paint it too. So, like, he did an awful lot of work for the UNF in Sudbury. You know, yeah, we had presidents, and my dad was president for I don't know how many years, and but I think your dad is probably going to be the one that's remembered the most.
Going into the downtown area, Mr. Kuryliw would get the manager of the stores, and he would say, "We have come to Carol," and we would stand at the lunch counter, for instance, and this would be at Woolworths, at the Kresge's and Silverman's and Muirhead's, and we would stand near the front door, near the lunch counter, and we would sing. But we had a good choir, so we could sing fairly well in harmony, and then we would give a greeting after, and it was in Ukrainian, which was its best wishes for a fruitful coming year. But why we did that, and it was a wonderful experience, is that everybody in the store was of a different nationality, and it really promoted our Ukrainian culture. But in the other aspect of that was that people got to know who we were and who we were about, and then we would get generous donations from the stores. I mean, I'm talking about in the 50s, and we would get like $50, which was a lot of money, because most people would only give us $2 at that time. We never went broke. I'll tell you, when we were in Moon and your father was, you know, our intermediary for getting sponsors, we were very flush. We were always in the black.
One of the things that endeared my dear father-in-law, Wasyl, to me was the fact that he was very supportive in the various projects that I undertook over the years. And as proof of it, my teaching in Ukraine required that I produce a lot of teaching materials, and I put something together for a book. And this is the product. Metodika викладання історії. And so he used to come over to the house from the nursing home, and he used to ask Ihor, he says, "What's she doing up there all the time?" He says, "She's on the computer, she's writing a book." "Well, what is this book for?" So of course I had to explain everything to him. So one day he came up to me and he says, "Do you need money to produce this book?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "How much is it going to cost?" I said, "Well, the last time I was in VIEW, I talked to someone, and it was about $3,000 to be able to produce a certain number of books, 1,500 books, so that I could hand them out when I teach courses." And he said, "Okay, don't worry about the money. You'll have it, because it's something that I support, education, etc., etc." And of course, he supported me, and that was important too.
In, I guess it was around maybe the early 60s, he bought some land outside of Sudbury, which, as it turned out, was a lot more valuable than he might have expected. And maybe 10 years later, the province came along and bought the land for the mineral rights. And it was with that windfall, he used that windfall the way he always did, to help others.
Once he decided on giving money, he was very interested in seeing students learn about Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian language, and Ukrainian history, and so on. And I remember once coming to Toronto, and Ihor said to me, "You know, my dad has $100,000 which he wants to give to students, student awards. What would be a good place to place that thing?" And he mentioned a few universities. And I said, "Well, you know, all of them are fantastic. And by the way, I'm starting off something which is called Ukrainian Folklore Studies. So if you are interested in donating some money for for students in Ukrainian folklore studies, that is also a possibility. So Ihor, I guess, must have talked it over with his parents, and you know, it slowly but surely it developed. The government decided to give a matching of $2 for every dollar donated. So in other words, your father's money, $100,000, came out as a total of $300,000. I know there was a special celebration in Edmonton where the family came and the president was there and other people were speaking and so on. And I think, if I can remember, your dad quoted certain verses from Ivan Franko.
I'm Andrina Hachowski. I am the Hutsilyak Chair of Ukrainian Culture and Ethnography at the University of Alberta. I'm the director of the Cool Folklore Center, and of the many beautiful things I get to do is to administer the awards from the Kuryliw Family Endowment, the Ivan Franko Assistantship Awards, primarily. So this scholarship has been given to about 40 different graduate students in the Ukrainian folklore program, probably about 100 semesters worth of support, because some of them were for a shorter period and some of them for a longer period. So that's basically every grad student that we've ever had in our program. There are 3 students right now being funded. One is Larissa Chelyadin. She's from Edmonton, a very well-established, pretty famous Ukrainian Canadian painter. I would say Canadian painter. She's doing a master's thesis on Ukrainian Canadian embroidered pillows. It seems like a strange topic, but you know, in Ukrainian houses all over Canada, everybody knows their Easter eggs, everybody knows their rushnike, and everybody on their sofa, on the back of the sofa, is an embroidered pillow somewhere or other. And the pillows have never been studied. Stylistically, they've changed an awful lot over time. When did it change from something you sleep on to something that's an ornamental ethnic symbol that you use to represent your identity? Another one is Natalia Bezborodova. She's from Kiev. She came here intending to do one project, but just the semester after she came was the Maidan and all of the stuff that was happening in Kiev and in many cities around the country there. And she became really homesick. Her sister was on the Maidan, and she was in contact with her every day, mostly on Facebook. And now she's changed her master's thesis project to one that I think is very interesting and very exciting. How does Facebook function as an intimate, personal form of communication? So she has collected something like 9,000 Facebook posts during the period of the Maidan, people talking about it, and she's analyzing those posts for expressive culture. How do people respond when they were an eyewitness? How do they tell a story that somebody else told to them? And so she's analyzing Maidan Facebook as folklore. These students many of them are Canadians, many of them are Ukrainians from Ukraine. Although it's been quite successful internationally. We've had students from Korea, a student from Bulgaria, several from the United States, from Turkey, from Brazil, from China, from Russia. So quite a few people from various countries with a specific interest come, and they find us because this funding allows us to be narrow but really deep within our field. So we're kind of the place to go if you want this specific discipline. And so Sogu Hong, Dr. Sogu Hong, finished his PhD with us and then became the first Ukrainian professor in Korea, which is a pretty fancy, pretty wonderful accomplishment on his part and a great feather in our cap. And that's all thanks to the Kuryliw endowments, because he wouldn't have been able to do his PhD without that kind of support. So the reach of the influence of this endowment and of our program in general is broadly international. We're proud of that.
This was not just a feather in the Cool Center's cap. Establishing this scholarship was a fitting tribute to my father's values and Ivan Franko's philosophy. A few years later, it became apparent that both of my parents, now approaching 90, were becoming frailer, and it seemed best that they moved to Toronto, where their children lived. It was a difficult decision for my father. An article in Northern Lights stated, "He loved the city of Sudbury, he loved to walk its streets, he loved the opportunities it offered him, including the pure blueberry patches on the outskirts of Sudbury. He loved the citizens of Sudbury."
As I mentioned, that 67 years in Sudbury, and many of you famous mayors and so on, was pleasure to stay, and Sudbury, that's my heart. But situation like this, my son say better if I take you before you be in the town. So, couple more years with the children, maybe I get 90. If you will celebrate something in Sudbury, please write me to Toronto, and I will come again to show my heart that Sudbury is worth it to stay. Thank you.
After my parents moved to Toronto, they were able to spend time with their family. But my father lost some of the things that he had loved so much in Sudbury, some of the things that had defined his life for so many years, the time he spent outdoors and his connections to the Ukrainian and wider Sudbury communities. He still walked daily through his new neighborhood as long as he was able to. After the death of my mother in 2001, he moved into a nursing home, one named after Ivan Franko, and even there he still recited poetry.
And I was saddened when your brother took me to see your dad at the Ivan Franko there, and in the room there. And here's a man who loved to read, who loved to, to walk. And for some reason or other, God took away both his sight and his ability to get around. And I thought, geez, what a harsh way to end a life.
It was because he was no longer able to read that he frequently asked us to read him Franko's Притча про життя, a parable about life.
А втім, о диво, на гілках берізки побачив той нещасний чоловік гніздо чмелів. У щільнику малому було там трохи меду, а чмелі всі полетіли в поле за пожитком. І закортіло чоловіка того покушать меду. Він всіх сил добув, піднявся трохи вгору, і устами досяг щільник, і сать його почав. І враз, немов рукою відняло йому від серця. Солодощі меду заставили його про все забути. Про все забув той чоловік, найшовши в тих краплинах медових несказанну високу розкіш раю. Отама Будда, Азії світило, очима духа бачив всю пригоду, і своїм вірним так про неї мовив. Сей чоловік, брати, то кожний з нас. Нема нам виходу із того горя, нема рятунку, та одно лиш нам лишилось те, чого ніяка сила, ніяка нам пригода взять не може. Все чиста розкіш братньої любові, все той чудовий мід, якого крапля розширює життя людське в безмір, підносить душу понад всю тривогу, над всю турботу із-за діл минущих в простори, повні світла і свободи. Хапайте сквапно краплі ті, брати, бо лиш в тому, що серце ваше чує, чим груди повні, чим душа живе, у розкоші любові і бажання, в братерстві, у надії, у змаганні до вищих, чистих цілей є ваш рай.
My father died in March of 2004 at the age of 94. On the other side of the world, the bell in the chapel in Potochische, which he had raised money for, tolled in his honor. We selected a gravestone that evoked memories of the rocks of Sudbury. It even includes a reproduction of the big nickel commemorative coin. At the base of the stone are the words of Ivan Franko. Ne zabudь, юних днів. Do not forget the days of youth.
Ох, погані дні,